So in this session, we will be focusing on some examples regarding rectification of errors, and then as a part of the session, I'll be discussing four scenarios or four examples with all of you. So now let's look at the first example. The first example that we have decided to share was the error goes like this: a sum of rupees 500 received from Shibin has been credited to his account as 150. So now what has happened over here is you carried out a transaction with Shibin, and the transaction that you have carried out with Shibin was worth rupees 500, but instead of recording it as 500, now you have recorded it as 150. Okay? You were supposed to record it as 500, but instead of recording it as 500, you have now recorded it as 150. So which means here it is an error with regards to the amount. This would be an example of error of commission. If this is an example of error of commission. Now, next important step that you have to remember with regards to this is, let's try and evaluate the impact. Okay, let's try and evaluate the impact. So the first thing is that we have to try and understand, is it a one-sided or is it a two-sided error? So here, this error deals only with one account, which is Shibin's account. It is a one-sided error. Since the error that we are dealing with, it deals only with one account, it is a one-sided error. Now, because it is a one-sided error, we have also have a clear understanding how exactly will it impact the trial balance. Now we have a clear-cut understanding about how exactly will it impact the trial balance. Next thing is, let's try and understand what is the nature of the error. So Shibin account is personal in nature. Shibin account is personal in nature. The golden rule is debit the receiver, credit the giver. Here, debit the receiver, credit the giver. So here, Shibin is the giver. Okay, Shibin is the giver. So Shibin's account should have been credited with 500. Okay, Shibin's account should have been credited with 500. But instead of crediting 500, what we have done is we have credited it as 150. Okay, we have credited it as 150. So Shibin's account is under credited. Okay, Shibin's account is under credited. Now, how did we know it is under credited? We were supposed to credit 500. Instead of crediting 500, we have credited it as 150. Okay, we were supposed to credit it as 500, but instead of crediting it as 500, we have credited it as 150. So that is the error that we have over here. And here, so since it is under credited, under credit, how do we rectify? Under credit, we rectify by crediting. Okay, we have to credit Shibin's account. Okay, so Shibin's account must be credited. Okay, Shibin's account must be credited. So Shibin's account must be credited with another 350. Okay, Shibin's account should be credited with another 350. So, how do we go about with the passing of the error? Now, what we have clearly understood, we have to credit Shibin's account. Okay, we have to credit Shibin's account. So, since we have to credit Shibin's account, we will have to use suspense account. So, suspense account debited to Shibin's account. Suspense account debited to Shibin's account. So Shibin's account we are credited. Okay. So with that, we have completed. So narration will be being rectification of under credit of Shibin's account. The rectification of under credit of Shibin's account, and Shibin's account we are crediting it with 350. Okay, so with that we have completed the first example. The first example we identified that Shibin's account it was under credited, and any under credit error we rectified with by crediting. Second step, sale of rupees 1000 has been credited to sales account as rupees 100. Sale of rupees 1000 has been credited to sales account as rupees 100. So here the first step is we have to try and understand, is it one-sided or is it a two-sided error? Okay, the first step is it one-sided or is it a two-sided error? Since it is a one-sided error, we will have to use suspense account. Since it is a one-sided error, we will have to use suspense account. Second step is, let's try and understand the impact. Let's try and understand the impact. So let's try and understand the impact. So here, sales account. Now let's try and see what type of account is sales account. Sales account is real. Golden rule is debit what comes in, credit what goes out. Okay, debit what comes in, credit what goes out. When you make a sale, what happens? Goods are going out. Okay, goods are going out. So here you have carried out a sale. The sale amount is for rupees 1000. Instead of crediting it as 1000, you have credited it as 100. You were supposed to credit it as 1000, but instead of crediting it as 1000, you have credited it as 100. So here, sales account, let's try and understand the impact. It is it over debited, under credited, over credited, under debited? So here, the sales account is under credited. Sales account is under credited. So under credit, how do we rectify? Under credit, we rectify by crediting. So which account will we credit? We will have to credit sales account. Okay, we will have to credit sales account. So example, the second example. The second example. What is the second example? Second example is suspense account debited to sales account. Now, what is the amount? Amount is 900. Now, how did I get 900? Remember, you were supposed to credit it with 1000, but instead of crediting it with 1000, how much did you credit? You credited it with 100. So there's a difference of 900. That's the reason why you have brought about this. So here, let me write the narration also, being rectification of under credit of sales account. Being rectification of under credit of sales account. So with that, we have completed this transaction also. Now let's move on to the next one. Example 3. Let's quickly analyze the transaction. The transaction goes like this. A sum of rupees 500 paid for interest has been credited to interest account. A sum of rupees 500 paid as interest or paid for interest has been credited to interest account. So here, is it one-sided or is it a two-sided error? Here it is a one-sided error. Second step is, let's try and understand which is the account involved. The account which is involved is interest account. Interest account is what type of account? It is nominal in nature. Golden rule for nominal account is debit all expenses, credit all incomes and gains. Debit all expenses and losses, credit all incomes and gains. So here, interest account, here what interest is it? Is it interest paid or is it interest received? Here it is interest paid. So when you pay interest, what is it? It is an expense. And when you pay that expense, what should you do? Will you debit or will you credit? You were supposed to debit, but instead of debiting, what did you do? You have credited. So instead of debiting, what have you done? You have credited. So here, what is the effect? The effect is that interest account is over credited. Okay, the interest account is over credited. You were not supposed to credit, but what have you done? You have credited. Second thing is that it was supposed to come on the debit side. Now it is not on the debit side. It is on the credit side. So it is also under debited. So under debit or over credit, how do we rectify? We rectify by debiting. Okay, we rectify by debiting. So which account will be debit? We will have to debit interest account. Okay, we will have to debit interest account. So interest account debited. Okay, interest account debited to suspense account. The interest account debited to suspense account. Now, interest account debited to suspense account. Now, what is the amount? What amount will we go for? Now, what you have to remember is interest account should have been debited on Okay, so there is 500 missing on the debit side. Now, instead of putting it on the debit side, what have you done? You have put it on the credit side. Now, what has happened? Your credit side is excess by 500. Your credit side is already excess by 500. So now you have two tasks, or there are two objectives that you have to fulfill, or there are two duties that you have to fulfill. First thing is that you have to reduce the amount on the credit side by 500. Second thing is you have to increase the debit side by 500. So for that, though the error amount is the transaction amount is 500, you will not bring in 500, you will bring in 1000. Now, why are you bringing in 1000? The reason why we are bringing in 1000 is because there's already an excess of 500 on the credit side that has to be removed, and there is another 500 which has to be brought into the debit side that is being brought in. So that's the reason why we are having this transaction like this. Being So with that, we have rectified the third error. Okay? We have rectified the third error. So with that, we have completed these three examples. Now there's one last example that I will have to work out with you, which I will be doing right now. Before that, let me quickly erase the board for you. And then together, we will look at the transaction, and then we will try and rectify the error together. So what is the final transaction? The final transaction is purchase of machinery of rupees 500 has been debited to purchase account. Purchase of machinery of rupees 500 has been debited to purchase account. Here there are two accounts involved. First is machinery account, second is purchase account. So here there are two accounts which are involved. One is machinery account, second is purchase account. Machinery account is what type? So here, since there are two accounts involved, this would be a two-sided error. Here, since we have two accounts which are involved, this would be a two-sided error. So two-sided errors, how do we rectify? Two-sided errors, we will have to rectify by bringing in the amounts which are involved. Now, how do we know it is a two-sided error? Whenever you carry out a purchase of machinery, technically it is the machinery account which has to be brought in. But instead of using the machinery account, which account have you used? You have used the purchase account. So purchase of machinery, remember we have to bring in the corresponding asset account, and the corresponding asset account was machinery but we didn't use missionary. Instead, we have used purchase. So let's talk about this a little bit more in detail. So purchase of missionary should have been debited to missionary account, but we have not done that. Instead, we have brought that into the purchase account. So how do we go about with this? Purchase of missionary should have been debited to missionary account, but now missionary account is under debited. Missionary account is under debited. So under debit, how do we rectify? Under debit we rectify by debited. So example 4, missionary account debited. Missionary account debited. Okay, so missionary account is being debited, and the amount that you will be debiting is 500. Now, what is the condition with respect to purchase account? Purchase account, you have debited, you were not supposed to debit. Okay, purchase account is debited, but you were not supposed to debit that account. So how do we rectify that? We have to, so now what is the condition with respect to purchase account? Purchase account is over debited. Okay, purchase account is over debited. So purchase account, since it is over debited, how do we rectify? We rectify by credited. So purchase account has to be credited. So purchase account rupees 500 being incorrect debit of missionary to purchase. So with that, we have completed this. Missionary account debited 500, purchase account debited 500, and with that we have completed the solved examples. With that note, we have completed the solved examples.